Hey, what's going on, everybody? I've been a blacksmith for over 10 years now, and the first 5 years of that journey were spent in my backyard. And let me tell you, it was interesting. Here at FirstBuild, we love to learn, we love to make, and we love to share our space with the community. Now, with that ethos in mind, I thought, why not give a virtual lesson? Because one of the biggest questions I get is, hey, how do I blacksmith? So we're talking backyard blacksmithing, and specifically we're talking which tools do you need to get started? What's the most essential? What are maybe a little extra? And what do you need to look out for? Now, disclaimer, everything in this video is, of course, my personal opinion, so be safe, take precautions, let's dive in. The first and most obvious thing you're gonna need is space. So you got to think, do you have electricity? Do you have water access? What's going on back there? Is there greenery? Because I found that the grass and things around in the immediate area does not survive. You also got to think, how far away are you from buildings? What's going on with your neighbors? You know, this is a noisy craft, and some people are not going to appreciate that. Also, depending on what kind of forge you use and what kind of fuel, it can be a stinky craft. And your neighbors might also not appreciate that. So keep these things in mind, prep your space, kind of measure it out, lay it out before you get started, or you're gonna have a bad time. All right, the first and arguably most important tool is, of course, the forge. So most forges are gonna be gas powered, usually propane, sometimes natural gas. We've got a natural gas forge here. You can also use charcoal, coal, and of course, induction. For the first 4, maybe 5 years of my journey, I used a charcoal forge. I do not recommend it. This is my personal opinion. It's no fun. It's a big pain. You're constantly fumbling. You have to kind of maintain the hot area, and you're burning through fuel quickly. So even if that fuel is a little bit cheaper, the time you spend managing the fire, the time you spend messing with the fire, it adds up, and your fuel, your money is burning the whole time. Now, when I started, there wasn't a lot of options for gas forges, but now there are a ton of options. I've seen them all over the internet, big box stores. I've seen them as cheap as like 75 bucks. Maybe a single, probably a double burner forge would be my recommendation. You can do 3 burners, and that's fine. I have a 3 burner back here behind me. When I used gas in my backyard when I finally upgraded, if I had all 3 burners on full blast, run through a tank in maybe an hour or 2, depending, or I'd have maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours at that maximum heat, and then it would kind of taper off. Now, if I ran at a much lower temperature, just enough to get, you know, a cherry red working temp, you know, that could run up to somewhere, say 5-6 hours, maybe even more. Gas forges is also easy to see what you're doing. You can see the piece the whole time. You have a lot more control. I'd say the downside and the thing to look out for a gas forge is keeping the gas line far enough away from the heat of the forge. You know, it puts off a lot of heat, not just out of the front or whatever opening you have. There's a lot of radiant heat. So from time to time, I have used pieces of metal to prop the gas line away. So keep that in mind, because gas lines can melt. And of course, one of the other downsides of a gas forge is the weather. You don't want to leave it out in the rain. So you're gonna have to wait for it to cool down before you pack it up and bring it inside. The next tool on our list is the forge stand. Now here's something else that's often overlooked, is you gotta have somewhere to put your forge. It's not gonna sit on the ground. It doesn't want to sit on anything flammable. You need a place or a stand or something that's not going to tip over to house the forge. You can get some cheap metal stands, again, at the big discount box stores. You might forget and then get out there and realize, oh yeah, duh, where's this going to go? Next tool on the list is the anvil. Now, just like forges, anvils have become much more readily available. It can be daunting. You know, you look at some of the big anvils and you're like, oh man, I want that, I need that. It's thousands of dollars. Now, I have personally tested out a handful of anvils here. We have a blacksmithing club. I had to get several different types of anvils to kind of service club. And I tried one of these like $140 anvils from the big discount box store. And I did not have high hopes for this, but it has held up incredibly well, honestly. I'm very, very pleased with this thing. For like 130, 140 bucks, this thing is awesome. Now, all anvils out there are cast iron, cast steel. The difference is on a good traditional anvil, you've got a cast iron body, and then you have a big piece of hardened or hardenable steel that's been forge welded onto the top. Now that hardened steel has rebound, and that's what you want to see. You want your hammer to almost spring back up at you when you swing. With a nice hard surface, you're going to be transferring most of your energy into your piece, and you're also going to get some rebound, which is going to save you some energy and some arm strength. It makes a big difference. I've used some really bad anvils that have no bounce, and I've used some really good ones, and it is a world of difference. Now, if you're out here on a budget, I will say any big, thick piece of metal that you can use as an anvil, more power to you. I would say if you can, kind of look up some of these smaller anvils. They're all gonna say cast. Some of them are cast and that's it. Some of them are cast iron, some of them are cast steel. Cast steel, what does that really mean? You know, I don't know, but it's an indicator that it's probably a little bit better. And if all else fails, look at the reviews. Next essential tool on the list is the anvil stand. Here's another tool that I don't see brought up quite a bit. People are like, oh yeah, get a forge and an anvil and hammers and stuff. Well, where are you gonna put all that? An anvil stand is almost just as important as the anvil. When I was first starting out, I did put my anvils or my pieces of metal or whatever I was using on the ground sometimes. I absolutely don't recommend that. You know, I was always on the lookout for trees that were cut down, or how do I get a giant log, or you know, that classic stump. I found when I was in my backyard, a great anvil stand was just a bunch of 2x4s, and you kind of lay them out in blocks. So you'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, give or take, or however much you need, and then stack them in the alternate direction. And as you go, you just screw them all together. And I had a ton of old 2x4s, and I got a pretty good anvil stand, and that thing was heavy and very affordable. You're gonna wanna think about how is your anvil secured to the stand. You know, if you have a loose anvil, it's no fun. It's gonna move around and you're gonna lose some energy. It's so much better to secure it down to your stand. You can buy or make little fancy brackets. You can also just use nails, screws, whatever, create little feet, bend them over, whatever you have to do to hold that thing down. One of the game changers I discovered and learned from other folks out there is gluing your anvil down with silicone. The high-pitched noises of the anvils were driving me crazy, and I was looking for any way to quiet them down. You'll see anvils with big heavy chains around their bases. You'll see people talking about big magnets. I can tell you the magnets don't do anything. We tried. Don't use magnets. The chains might work a little bit. We tried it. I didn't really notice much of a difference, but the biggest thing is I got some metal silicone, and you just glue these suckers down to the base. They lost whatever little micro bounce they had left, and the high pitches of the anvil are completely gone. So if you take away anything from this video, glue your anvil down if you can. It's amazing. All right, next up on your essential list of tools is, of course, your hammer. Now, like most of the tools, hammers are one of the things that people can really get hung up on. Oh, I need a really good hammer. Oh, I need this kind of hammer. What the heck does this little thing do back here? What is that, cross peen? I say, try not to stress about it. Blacksmithing hammers or cross peen hammers are pretty ubiquitous. They're everywhere. What I will say to look out for is the weight. During my career, I have had a countless number of individuals try to tell me that I needed a 5-pound hammer. I needed a big hammer. You will hate it after about 5 minutes. My opinion on the best sweet spot for a hammer would be 2.5 pounds. 2.5 pounds is great. 2 pounds is a little bit light. 3 pounds can feel a little bit heavy. 2.5 is a sweet spot. My favorite hammer here is 2.5 pounds because it's much more important to have accuracy over power. I highly doubt, especially if you're starting out, you're just gonna be hammering away on a giant block of steel. As far as what kind of hammer, as long as it has a decent sized face, honestly, I use ball peen hammers quite a bit. I use the ball on the ball peen to do a lot of little techniques and texturing. Now they might be a little sharp. Look at your hammer, you kind of want a rounding over on the face. You don't need to be extreme about it, but some hammers can be a little sharp on their edges, on their corners. because if you're off on your strikes a little bit, a sharper edge on the edge of your hammer, you're gonna see that, you're gonna notice it, it's gonna be ugly. But a more rounded face is gonna give you a little more grace. All right, everybody, next up on the list is tongs. Tongs can be absolutely overwhelming because there are so many types, varieties, sizes, names. There's wolf jaw tongs, and then there's German wolf jaw tongs. And what are we doing? What's going on? Now, when I first started out, I was a poor boy, and I used some long-handled channel lock pliers. They weren't great, but they held on, so something's better than nothing. If you're just starting out, you're probably not going to be buying a bunch of pairs of tongs, and if you had to get one pair, one type, best bang for your buck, I would recommend wolf jaw tongs. Specifically the ones that look like a waffled alligator. I don't remember if that's the German variety or not. Now, a lot of people will poo-poo wolf jaw tongs because they're kind of like the Swiss Army knife of tongs. Like, they're good for any situation, which really means they're like mediocre for every situation because they're not specifically good for any one thing. And as much as I agree with that sentiment, I still think these are the best bang for your buck as far as like a general use pair of tongs. They've got the different grooves that can grab different size pieces. And generally, I will hand these to my students first until they get their pieces set up for some more specialized tongs. Now, most tongs you're gonna run into have a V jaw in their mouth. You're not gonna grab things kind of the traditional way. You think of pliers, you think of scissors, you're like, oh, I grab like this. No, sometimes you do, of course, but really you wanna get pieces, even flat pieces, locked in, kind of perpendicular or locked into those V grooves of tongs. Which brings me to my most important point. Do not buy flat-mouthed tongs. You know what I'm talking about. Just flat jaw, flat mouth. It seems like the right choice. You're like, oh yeah, that'll grab things just like a pair of pliers. You're wrong. You're very wrong. What happens with flat jaw tongs is there is pretty much always a pivot point. Even if you're flat on flat, it's never gonna grab your piece totally flat, and that thing's gonna pivot like crazy and flop all over the place. And there's nothing worse than a flip-floppy, sliding, pivoting piece when you're trying to work it. I almost never, ever use these, and I steer my students away from these. So really do some research, maybe look up some videos or some pictures of the specific pair and size that you want so you can get an idea. I recommend wolf jaws, at least if you can only get one pair. Also, remember that your tongs can be modified, and modified fairly easily. You have a forge, you have a hammer, they're just steel sticks. You can make them tighter, you can make them more open, you can shape the handle. So don't get overwhelmed if they don't work out great in the beginning, because modification is totally doable. So try not to be overwhelmed, do your best, and if all else fails, use your hands. Finally, the last essential tool is a water bucket. That's right, a bucket of water, whatever you got. But get a metal bucket if you can, fill that with water, because you're gonna find you're standing there with a hot piece and you wanna set it down. Someone, hey, come in for dinner, you got a hot metal, what are you gonna do with it? Where are you gonna sit it? Or maybe you cut off a piece and now you have two pieces of red hot metal. What are you gonna do with them? You got a bucket of water right there, boom, it's out, it's extinguished. Bucket of water, always make sure that's on hand. And real quick, I'm gonna hit a few extra tools that I think will help you pretty fairly on in your journey, if not immediately, although I wouldn't say they were absolutely essential. The first is chisels. You're gonna wanna chisel things, I promise. If you're making little trinkets and things, you wanna make a cool dragon, you wanna make a wizard, you're gonna wanna make marks in that steel, so get yourself some metal chisels. Do not use wood chisels, I promise it's not good. Usually you're not using those chisels to cut through the steel, sometimes you are, but a lot of times they're used for making marks into the steel. All right, next up on the list are punches. You can find these, you can make these, the same with chisels. You can make them fairly easily, and they're great for when you wanna make bottle openers, or even when you're not punching all the way through something. Maybe you just wanna inset some little eyes on your frog sculpture, and punches are great for that. You can kind of dull them and round them, and then just don't hit quite as hard. All right, next up, brushes, both steel and brass. Believe it or not, I use my brass brushes way more than my steel brushes. What does a brass brush do? Well, it really just, if the piece is hot enough, you can brush your piece with a brass brush, and the brass kind of wicks and adheres just a little bit to the surface and gives it a gold finish. Trust me, it wows folks, especially who didn't know that you could do that. Steel brushes are great for getting scale off. There's the big brushes, which are really aggressive, but can maybe be too aggressive for smaller pieces and just rip them right out of your hand. But I'd recommend maybe a smaller hand steel brush with smaller wires. You can kind of get into the crevices and kind of drive that scale out. And my final tip is use what works. Don't let anybody poo-poo on you. As long as it's safe, right? And it gets the job done, why not? There's 100 ways to do anything. I firmly believe that. And I myself have used a lot of unconventional methods and tools and techniques to get the job done in a pinch. So that's the end of part one. This could totally and should be a series. I spent 5 years doing this in my backyard. There's tons more I'd love to share with you. So let us know in the comments what you want to see next, not just about backyard blacksmithing, but if you want a series like this on woodworking, on 3D printing, on how to use the lasers, how to set up CAD files, anything, let us know. You can also ask your blacksmithing questions in the comments, and I will do my best to decipher those and answer those as best as I can. Remember, the most important thing is to be safe and have fun. This is an incredibly rewarding craft. It is also crushingly frustrating at times. So give yourself some grace, take your time, always have a plan, and good luck. I'll see you next time.